Often we talk about how a coach can make a difference in a young person's life, but this next story goes beyond the typical coach-athlete relationship. Joyce Jackson has more on a Stuart High coach who's helped one athlete triumph off the field.
In October of 1993, Larry Whitener was hired to turn around the Jeb Stuart wrestling program. In the process, he turned around Rashish Ramsharam's life.
He was being kept after school in detention. He'd almost been suspended, and he was failing.
The problems were caused by stress. 7 years ago, Rashish, his mother, and two younger sisters came to America to escape a brutal life in Trinidad. In high school, Rashish worked to support the family, but by his junior year, they had to move into this shelter, and the pressure was beginning to take a toll.
Like, I'd go to school, and I'd be working, and I'd be tired, so I'd fall asleep, and the teachers get on my case, and I'd snap at them, and I got detention.
Fortunately, Rashish also spent a lot of time after school playing sports. Whitener became his wrestling coach in his junior year and got involved when the family was forced to go back to Trinidad.
He said that he would really like to stay, but he just didn't see how. And that's when I said, well, I've talked to my wife, and I am willing to give you the opportunity to stay with us if you'd like to.
It was a shock at first, and it's like, does he really know what he's getting into? But I talked to my mom, and she didn't really want me to go back.
Rashish has overcome a lot of obstacles to make life better. He has a stable home, he's on the principal's honor roll, and he's Stuart's first wrestling champion.
I don't know, without them, I wouldn't be here, and I don't know, they're just great people.
Rashish completed his high school career by setting a new school and district record in pole vaulting. He won the district championship and plans on attending George Mason University. Joyce Jackson, News Channel 8 Sports.
Good luck to Rashish.
Great story.
Absolutely. Very nice.
See you
Thanks
later.
for joining us.
Imagine being on stage for 6 hours, alone. Think about being the director, but without a script. See yourself paying to watch and never knowing the plot. In Fairfax County Public Schools, that's what teachers, administrators, and parents go through every day. This will be the first time that we can elect officials to rewrite our children's future. Experience, training, and education have prepared me for this role. Vote Whitener, School Board. Thank you. Accountability, budgeting, and communication should be the ABCs of any school board. In Fairfax County, this will be the first time that we can elect officials that will be responsive and responsible to the parents, teachers, and administrators of our children. Help me to help you to help them get back to the basics. Vote Whitener, School Board. Thank you. Reading, writing, arithmetic are the foundations upon which public education was built in this country. Fairfax County should get back to the basics while moving forward with technologies. Personal politics and special interests should have no place in our classrooms. This will be the first time that we can elect officials that will be accountable for our children's future. Care, commitment, and concern are what I will bring to our school board. Vote Whitener. Thank you.
House of Sight.
Here from the suburban jurisdictions affected by it. We're listening closely to our constituents, Bryant. The difficulty becomes that doing just the tax break by itself doesn't do the whole trick. Without some drastic changes in the public school system and public safety, you're not going to move people back into the District of Columbia. It's really not taxes that are driving people away, although that's certainly a factor, but it's the state of the school system and public safety.
Fair enough, but I would imagine, being from Northern Virginia, you wouldn't be too thrilled about the concept of giving huge tax breaks to district residents, because you might fear that a lot of businesses and people who live in Northern Virginia might go back into the district. You'd lose a lot of stuff out of Northern Virginia.
I don't think at the levels we're talking about it's going to have that kind of effect, quite frankly.
Capital gains, that would have a big impact on business, wouldn't it?
No, the problem with business going back in the city is you still have very high city taxes in a very bad regulatory environment, and that's what's driven.
So you're not concerned about that then?
Well, you always keep an eye on it, but I think at the levels of the tax breaks at this point, it should not drastically alter the landscape. But we're going to hold hearings and hear from some of the people affected.
Well, I know the hearings are going to be held, but I mean, basically right now you've got the Speaker of the House, you've got a lot of key people up there who think this is a wonderful idea. So, I mean, what's your gut feeling about it today? If you had to make a decision, what would you say?
Well, Brian, I still think it has a tough sledding up here. And the reason is you've got the Ways and Means Committee Chairman, Bill Archer, adamantly opposed to this. I spoke to him on the floor last evening. And the argument goes, for a $700 million swing to the District of Columbia, are you better off putting the money in the people's pockets in the city, or would you be better off, at least at first, getting the water pipes fixed, getting the prison system in shape, doing some other things with that money? Pretty good fundamental policy questions that I think need to be answered.
FBI Filegate, the committee's going to hear from 3 Secret Service agents today. What's the key thing you want to know?
Well, I think the key thing we all want to know is, where did this list that Mr. Livingstone and Mr. Marciso were looking at, where did it come from? It's been blamed on a civil service list, and I think we're going to hear today it didn't come from the civil service.
Do you think there's any there?
Secret Service.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Civil Service, Secret Service. Is there any there? Is there anything here that really points to any criminal activity, or was it, as the White House has maintained, just a big mess-up?
Well, no one knows. The problem is there are so many unanswered questions at this point. First of all, why this list with so many Republicans on it when you should have been investigating a number of Democrats who didn't have security clearances that were in high positions in the White House? Why were they not investigated, and people who had left the White House were investigated?
Well, some people think this is all political, that Republicans are just trying to gin up an election year issue.
Well, I think the White House has generated it, unfortunately. They hid this list when it was originally subpoenaed. They claimed executive privilege over it. It was only after the threat of a contempt citation that this was produced, and now they're having difficulty answering for it. I hope they can get the answers. We can come clean, put it behind us, and run a campaign on the issues and not on these other sideshows. But there are too many unanswered questions when one list is looked at and it's prominent with former Bush administration officials, and we don't know where that list came from. That's critical to understanding this.
So that's the real thing you'll focus on today.
So, yeah.
Okay, let me ask you a Republican Party politics thing.
Right.
Susan Molinari is going to be chosen as the keynote speaker for the GOP convention. She is pro-choice. Much discussion about what Bob Dole needs to do regarding a running mate. Should he or she be pro-choice or pro-life? First of all, your reaction to Molinari. Secondly, your thoughts on which way he should go for a running mate.
Well, I think Susan Molinari is a good choice. First of all, she's a baby boomer. She tends to be in the more moderate side, probably the most moderate member of the Republican leadership in the House. I think she's an excellent choice, and I think will give a great speech.
And the second part, about a running mate?
Well, I think you need to broaden the base of the party at this point. It has been too narrow, and we find too many voters, swing voters in the suburbs and elsewhere at this point, not feeling quite comfortable with Republican leadership. We need to make sure they feel welcome in this party, which is the party of tax cuts and balanced budget.
So you are urging a pro-choice running mate?
Well, I think that I certainly hope that you don't put the litmus test on running mates we've had in the past, where you have an ideological framework, and I think that Senator Dole is willing to put that aside. I wouldn't say they have to be one or the other, but you certainly don't want to eliminate a pro-choice vice president just because of their position on that issue.
Congressman Tom Davis, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us this morning. Up next, who should decide?
World leaders are making speeches to the UN General Assembly. Cuban leader Fidel Castro is in the city for a rare visit, and President Clinton and Russian President Boris Yeltsin have just finished a meeting and have reportedly made progress on the Bosnian crisis. A big surprise.
Saying last month he promised to stick with politics, saying this old Marine ain't about to just fade away. But Wilson says he has no interest in becoming a vice presidential candidate and would turn down that offer if extended. A book by House Speaker Newt Gingrich entitled To Renew America is selling fast, and some questions are being raised about why. The Reverend Jerry Falwell's Liberty University, a Georgia think tank, and the Conservative Youth Foundation are reportedly buying the book in bulk. Bulk orders by groups or individuals with an interest in legislation could violate House rules. The New York Daily News today reports it found 5 sales of bulk orders from 42 to 200 books, including some autographed by the Georgia Republican. A spokesman for the publisher of the Gingrich book says the company has been contacted by House Ethics Committee staffers, but so far there are no allegations of wrongdoing.
We've got some breaking news out of the state of Texas. A jury has...
Colin Powell's wife takes a rare step into the political arena in Fairfax County. We'll hear from folks who are fed up with the price of cereal.
Me neither. Coming up next, Colin Powell's wife in the political spotlight, but with a local connection. We'll explain.
That's sports when we come back.
Sorry, can't watch this.
The nation waits to find out whether Colin Powell is going to run for president. The general's wife is stepping into political waters herself for the first time. Alma Powell was at a Fairfax County news conference today to endorse her longtime friend and school board candidate Yvonne McCall. Colin Powell is also listed as one of McCall's backers. McCall is a retired Fairfax County principal and her husband a retired lieutenant general. The two families have known each other for more than 2 decades. Powell says that friendship drew her into the political process.
I might have qualms about diving into a political process in most cases. This time I had no doubts about what I was going to do.
What about diving into a political process in your husband's case?
I am not a political person. I support what is best for our country.
35 candidates are running as Fairfax County voters go to the polls in 2 weeks. They to choose their first elected school board. And coming up, by the way, on News 4 at 6, Julie Carrey looks at how the topic of creationism is stirring up voter interest in the county.
And coming up next, her voice takes you back to a different time.
Will go to the polls to choose their first elected school board. Julie Carrey joins us from the newsroom to tell us in a crowded field the candidates are trying to stand out in the pack. Julie?
Well, there are several dynamics at work in these school board races. Endorsements, of course, are crucial with a large field of little-known candidates. And hot-button issues also serve to define candidates. In Fairfax County, voter apathy is suddenly turning to voter anxiety as the topic of creationism creeps into the debate. It's not often you find a member of Congress out stumping for a school board candidate, but that was the case today as Republican Congressman Tom Davis organized a news conference to endorse at-large school board candidate Yvonne McCall. The former Silverbrook Elementary School principal can also boast an endorsement from former Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Colin Powell. Wife Alma Powell was there to speak for the couple.
The people of Fairfax County, the children, the parents will all be well served by Yvonne McCall.
The news conference was an attempt to single out one candidate in a crowded field. 35 people are running, 11 vying for 3 at-large positions. But there's another issue suddenly separating the candidates. The issue of creationism is acting as a lightning rod in these races, stirring voter interest. Candidates have been polled by the Conservative American Family Association and asked the question, would you support the teaching of both the creation and evolution theories of origin? Kenton Patty heads the Fairfax Council of PTAs.
Creationism, prayer in the schools, sex education, and all the opposition is coming from outside our county. It doesn't originate here.
McCall says her priority, if elected, would be on refocusing Fairfax County youngsters on the basics, making sure they master reading and computing by 3rd grade. She says creationism is not a viable issue.
Creationism is based on a Christian belief from the Bible, and I feel that that is a belief that I have as a Christian, but it should not be taught in the public schools.
At-large candidate Michelle Brickner responds to the survey question differently.
I believe that we should teach all theories about the origin of life, all valid theories that are out there.
But like McCall, Brickner recognizes the idea of teaching creationism is not a priority of Fairfax parents.
The only people I hear raising this issue are moderators at a forum or the media. Parents, I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of parents standing in front of grocery stores and going different places, and no one has raised that issue as a concern. Their concerns are academic rigor and budget.
Incidentally, according to that American Family Association survey, 12 of the 35 candidates said they would favor the teaching of creationism along with evolution. And a political footnote to this story, Congressman Tom Davis took some heat today for his endorsement of Yvonne McCall from fellow Republicans. She is not one of 3 candidates endorsed by the Fairfax County Republican Committee. Back to you.
Thank you, Julie. Julie Carey reporting. I want to correct a mistake that I made earlier in the broadcast.
Interstate Christopher is in Ohio for the beginning of Bosnian peace talks. A coalition of consumer groups weighs in on the impact of telecommunications bill, one which will affect your phone bill. A House Economic and Education Subcommittee hears arguments on English as a common language. And candidates running for Fairfax County School Board participate in their last forum tonight. We'll take a look at one of these issues in that race. It's called creationism, a little later on Fox Morning News. And Tony, here's your talking pumpkin.
Welcome back to Fox Morning News. It's 8:20 now. Fairfax County voters go to the polls next week to choose members of the school board. Well, of the 35 candidates who are running, 13 of them believe creationism, the biblical teaching of the origins of life, should be taught in public schools. Joining us this morning with a look at this issue, the Reverend Lewis Sheldon, chairman of the Traditional Values Coalition, and Bob Boston from Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Thank you both for joining us here. This is something that's getting a great deal of attention, not only here in the Washington area and in Fairfax County, but it's being watched literally around the country to see how this election turns out. I'm going to start with you, if I could, Reverend Sheldon. Let's talk a little bit about what you think should be taught in the schools. You believe that creationism is something that should be allowed in the classroom.
Well, our emphasis is not on what should be allowed as what should not be allowed, and evolution
well, what shouldn't be allowed then?
Evolution should not be taught dogmatically. We have always said this, and we didn't pick this fight. The liberals picked this fight by trying to shove down the minds and hearts of our young children that evolution was the only scientific theory concerning the origin of the earth. If a student wants to give a paper, and I believe this should be student initiated, if a student wants to give a paper or give a report or do some other research having to do with other theories on the origin of the earth, and those other theories do include the creation theory, then that should be an opportunity for that student. That should be their freedom of speech. But you see, that's not the case. The case is they don't even want that presented.
Rob Boston.
Well, what students do is one thing. What we're worried about is that school board members are going to come in here and tell schools that they have to water down the teaching of evolution, stop the teaching of evolution, and put a biblical model, basically religion, into public schools. And instead, the Bible is not a science book. And I think that's what we need to keep in mind. There are important scientific theories that we need to understand, that our students know as we move in to the next century, and teaching the Bible as science is not going to prepare them for the next century.
But they want to teach religion. Excuse me, they want to teach science as religion. So you see, it really is a matter of a straw man. They're trying to say this is what they're doing, but they're not telling people what they want. They want science taught as a religion. And that, we say, is the very thing that they are guilty of.
That's nonsense. Evolution is not a religion. It's a well-established scientific principle that is not seriously doubted in the scientific community today. We have established the age of the earth. We have established the evolution of life. There are people who would like to drag us back to the pre-Scopes days, do away with Darwinian evolution, and substitute a biblical model instead. The 21st century is coming up, and that type of thinking is not going to
Well,
help
it sounds like very much so that this is a religion that they're trying to teach. No, it's a dogmatism. They're just as dogmatic as they try and say that we are. And what we're asking for is a level playing field.
Well, let me ask you this, Reverend Sheldon, because there are many people who look at our Constitution, and I know that you have a difference of opinion about this, but many people look at the Constitution and say there is supposed to be a strict wall of separation between church and state. The Constitution doesn't allow religious matters to be taught in the public school, does it?
Sir, that's just a big lie. Where in our Constitution says anything about a separation? That was a 1948 decision that came from the Supreme Court. It's not written in our Constitution at all. But I think the issue
well, it's based on letters from the framers, though, wasn't it?
No. No, that's absolutely wrong.
Reverend Sheldon knows more than Thomas Jefferson.
It was based on a letter that Thomas Jefferson
wrote. He was
wrote.
one of the framers last time I checked.
No, but don't you have to remember, it wasn't a founding document. See, that's what you have to be careful when you say over the airwaves. You give the wrong information. Thomas Jefferson wrote a letter to a group of Baptist ministers after they complained to him about something. It was a private letter. There are a lot of private letters. Thomas Jefferson had a lot of immorality in his life, too. Now, we're not dealing up those private letters with him. I think the important thing here in Fairfax County today is very clear. The liberals are trying to say, we want a dogmatic teaching. We do not want any other views presented. This is a kind of narrow fundamentalism like I've never seen before.
Well, first of all, about separation of church and state. James Madison, who wrote the Bill of Rights, spoke of the need for a total separation between church and state. Now, I know Reverend Sheldon thinks he knows more about the Constitution than Madison and Jefferson, but that's not the case. As far as creationism, several school boards in the country have wrestled with this. They had religious right majorities on the board that tried to push it in Lake County, in Plano, Texas, in Vista, California, and Round Rock, Texas. The people booted them out. Fairfax County voters are not going to be fooled by this, and they're not going to have their children dragged back.
Rob, some of the people who we are calling creationists believe that this text called "of pandas and people" should be used in the classroom. And from the text itself, it says, "of pandas and people," it's not intended to be a balanced treatment by itself. We've given a favorable case for intelligent design. They do not use the word God anywhere in this document, the best I can tell. They call it intelligent design. Do you have any problem with that language?
Merely the latest term for creationism. They called it abrupt appearance. They've called it intelligent design. There's a creationist textbook that says that the reason the dinosaurs are extinct is that they were too big to fit on Noah's Ark. That's great for the Flintstones, but this is 1995.
Do you see the
that sort of thing is not going to work
Do you see
out.
the dogmatism out of their very mouths? This is the level of hypocrisy, and this is the level of dogmatism where they don't even want the slightest presentation of a different view. See, it's a different view that they can't deal with because they are the new kind of hardcore arch fundamentalists.
Yeah,
and really, in reality, I'm telling you, the National Education Association and the Fairfax Education Group, they are funding. They have given money. Now, they have a tie there, and that tie is very important. They've taken this kind of an issue, an emotional issue, and they have blown it up and said that we're guilty of that. No, we're not guilty of that. They're guilty of a dogmatism.
If you're saying to me that a view that teaches children that dinosaurs are no longer on the planet because they were too big to fit on Noah's Ark, yeah, I say that's a view.
That's not in that book.
It has no business in our public schools.
That's not in that book.
It is in lots of creationist books. I've got them in my office.
No, but it's not in the book that he referred to.
Things that are just as bad are in that book.
No.
I've read that book. It's garbage.
It's a straw man.
It's astrology.
It's a straw man.
I just have this feeling that this may be a preview of what some of the school board meetings could be like after the elections.
Well, I think very clearly that the people of Fairfax County have a very important decision.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. We're all out of time. Good discussion. Thank you both for being here. We appreciate it. Are D.C. schools out of control? Some say they are, and they are fighting back. And a witness is to testify before a grand jury.
Bob, I have not asked this question during the campaign. Somebody else has asked you this. I just wondered why, during the last campaign, a senatorial campaign, you didn't do as the other Senator Warner did and take the high road and opt out of supporting Ollie North.
I guess that's just the way you're raised. I don't recall ever seeing you, or for that matter, any other Democrat in Alexandria taking issue with Charles Robb's conduct or his performance in office when you had a perfectly good candidate saying Sylvia Clute. Everybody just fell into line. Politics and political parties are like families. You don't always like the people in your family, but they're still your family. Maybe I'm just kind of old-fashioned about that. I didn't go out and work for that candidate with any great deal of enthusiasm because I'd back somebody else in the nomination process. But that's just what I call political manners. And maybe old-fashioned. That's why I am.
Senator Calhoun, one final question to me.
Well, just for the record, all this stuff that you heard about the radical agenda, I didn't vote for any of that, and I'm not for any of that, so just so we're clear about that. I think, let's suppose you're wrong, and we do get a Republican majority in the Senate, and I'm not there. Where does Alexandria exist?
Alexandria would have an outspoken proponent for the things that Alexandria has found value in, which is education, early childhood development programs, which I would be a spokesman for and try to find ways to spread those programs throughout the state. It would, we would be talking about public safety in terms of more prevention programs. For instance, not dropping the money for dropout prevention and Project Discovery and all of the things that give kids, you know, a lift up and that really bring business to our state. I think that I can do, I just will take the initiative. I may not be able to fight the trend if it is that radical group, but I can certainly be an outspoken proponent, and we can get probably a good bit of Alexandria and the 30th District's agenda through there.
All right. Thanks to both of you. That's all the time we have now for the crossfire round. Now each candidate will...
I have a lot of experience and a proven record of leadership and results during that time. But the reason that I'm running is because I am truly worried about the future of our state. This group, and certainly Governor Allen's agenda, and some of his friends, and there are a lot of his friends down there, and he's trying to get more of them, are not very good friends of Northern Virginia. And even if we have a handful of Republicans who do happen to be committee chairs, I think if that budget goes through, which Governor Allen tried to get through last time, they're going to be being the host at a feast of plucked chicken, and it's not going to do any good. So I think that I have taken the initiative. I have a record of proven experience here. I'd like to translate that to the state. Thank you very much.
Oh.
Well, I've never been very clear. Can we get a little more definition of what the radical agenda is?
Yes. I think the radical agenda is wanting to have vouchers, wanting to have to do away with a woman's right to choose. I think that a radical agenda is cutting, slashing and burning school money, and building prisons that you are bonding for so that the children are paying for it later. Cutting prevention funds like the dropout prevention in Alexandria, $250,000. Those are things I think are quite radical.
All right, we have just a little bit of time left, and I want to give Mayor Ticer an opportunity to ask a question to Senator Calhoun, and then you can have one more question to fire at, but there'll be no follow-up questions. So one more question for you.
All right. Gee, I didn't know I was going to